Hey folks, this is Brian Jones with EDX. Thanks for joining. We'll go ahead and give folks just a few minutes to get started here, and then we'll get going. Okay, let's go ahead and get started here. A few more folks may trickle in, but that's fine. Again, my name's Brian Jones. If we haven't spoken before, I'm the customer success manager at EDX Wireless. And today, what we're going to be looking at is sort of the project deliverables that you can produce with SignalPro. And we're kind of going to drill down into some of the different reports and also validations that you can do if you're, delivering study results to a customer or to, a project manager or something like that. And we are going to have a question and answer session at the end. So as we're going along, if you want to use either the chat window or the Q&A window to ask questions, I'll be trying to keep up and check in with those. Um, I see a hand raised. If you have a question, go ahead and put it into the the Q&A panel, or if you don't see a Q&A panel, maybe just use the chat window. Oh, here I see it. Oh, I'm echoing. I've only got the one
Sounds
microphone.
okay to me.
What's that?
The audio seems okay to me, so it might be just on one of the users' ends possible.
Oh, okay. Okay. Sorry, if anyone else is having audio issues, could you go ahead and just chime in on the question and answer panel and let me know? Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, Kevin, please do feel free to like break in and let me know if there's a question or if there's a problem with the audio or anything like that. Um, okay, so let's get into kind of the agenda items here. Again, our sort of theme for today was to try and show some of the export features and some of the capabilities in Signal Pro that sometimes when we jump into trainings, folks are not aware that they can export things in a certain way or okay. I guess multiple folks are getting this audio echo. Um, I'm quite close to my microphone at this point. Could somebody let me know is that any better?
It does still sound just fine to me. I haven't had any audio issues here on my end.
Hmm. Okay, well, yeah, I'm sorry, folks who are. I see some folks are having no echo and other folks are having some trouble hearing it. I wonder if it's maybe a Zoom issue or um, certainly if you have more than one audio device enabled, I always try and turn that off. I don't use earbuds or anything like that. Um, So, okay, getting back to this agenda, sort of the main items I wanted to talk through today were, first of all, step one before we deliver any reports to our customer, we want to have an answer to the question, how can I show that my prop model is accurate for this particular region, this frequency band use case? And if at all possible, we'd like to do some real world validation of that model, either based on a really similar past project or based on actual field measurements from this project area. Um, and then so we'll take a look at that. And then we're going to take a look at the study query tools and some of what you can get out if you're trying to answer the question, sort of how much of the area of interest or how many of the fixed subscriber locations, how much of my railway route am I covering or meet the target design criteria. The study query has some great useful features for getting those kind of percentage values, the pass or fail numbers out of the tool without having to go off and use another GIS platform, which I still sometimes find folks doing. Um, and then finally, we'll go through kind of a quick list of export possibilities and shortcuts that you may or may not be aware of, so that if there's an easier, more convenient way to get the deliverables you need, hopefully I'll point this out to you and you can use that in the future. Um, we're going to do a little bit of Q&A about some of those features we look at. And then I've got one or two little product teasers that I won't be able to show you too much, but I will kind of tell you what's coming down the road that's exciting. Um, so let's talk about first validating the propagation model and assumptions themselves in Signal Pro. And as we go through this, as usual, I'm kind of going to jump into the software here so I can show you what we're talking about. And as usual, if I'm starting up a new project or just checking through my project template to look at how things are set up, first I would address my terrain and clutter databases, 3D buildings if I've got them. But then I would want to look at these propagation model options. And again, in case you haven't looked at this dialog in a little while, we've got multiple different prop model settings within a project so that I can create one set of settings on this line and then another prop model or another set of settings on another line so that maybe if I have a rural area of the county that I want to cover with a different prop model than my downtown urban core, I can set those up here and use those, assign those to different sectors, different sites in the project. And crucially, I can use my test against measurement function here, regardless of which model I have selected and regardless of which clutter options I have selected here. I can always use this test against measurement to say, okay, for one single sector, if I have field measurement data for that sector, how accurately have I tuned this model to that sector? And this, you want to choose some representative sectors in the project. Again, if you have a downtown urban core, and then you also have some rural areas, maybe you would, as you're coming up with your drive test routes, maybe you would select some representative sort of regions and test test the propagation model assumptions you're using against what the predictive model is going to give you. And that includes both which model type you're using. Normally, uh, if we are setting up the propagation model to target the mean or average signal level that we would measure at a point, then I would set these values to 50% and 50%, so that we're looking at just the model itself. But if I apply some additional margin here, or I apply fading and variability margin, those things will come out in the model tuning as well. Same goes if I choose a completely different modeling approach. If I want to compare the 3GPP empirical model, which is more of a distance-based model that doesn't really take advantage of clutter, that normally isn't designed to take advantage of clutter. And let's say I want to compare that to Anderson 2D with the clutter data and the clutter assumptions that I have. If you're working in some parts of the world, maybe you have kind of low resolution clutter and you're asking yourself, well, should I even use this clutter or should I use an empirical model instead? And to my mind, field measurement data is the ultimate arbiter of that question, and you can always use your test against measurement function here to make that comparison. And also, if you're using the pass-through clutter loss here, if you're using this method where we treat the clutter as a lossy screen to accrue clutter as the line of sight path goes through it, then you can also tune those values automatically using the tune pass-through loss feature here. Um, but again, this will allow you to validate your model assumptions essentially for one site or one sector at a time. If we want to take a look at the finished results, so let's say I've run my RSRP study for a whole area. Um, Here, we'll set this for the status bar as well. If I've run this for the whole area and I want to say, well, but I have drive test results that cover the entire area, or I've taken measurements somehow from fixed subscribers across the entire area, and I want to compare those measurements against, what I've predicted for the entire area study. For that, we actually have a tool here in the studies menu and measurement analysis. You can actually plug in measurement data for whatever area study you'd like to test against, and you can see, how well that overall area prediction lines up with your test data. Of course, the best practice is to tune for an individual sector, and either choose some really representative sectors in your project, or if you're really trying to get uh, down to fine detail in an area that has a lot of clutter variability, you might actually tune to each site. Obviously, that would be in an already deployed and operating network. If we're greenfield or early days in a project, then I would say we either want to start with some fairly conservative assumptions and or an empirical model, and then get some field test data at some point in the project and test and validate those assumptions. And let me just jump back to my slide deck here. There's a little teaser of that measurement analysis window here, but I'd like to take a little bit closer look at this and kind of talk through it here. Um, what we have in this scatter plot, when you run that test against measurements function, for every location that you have a measurement for, it's going to run a prediction to that precise location using the propagation model options that you've set up. And in this case, you can see we've got clutter loss turned on. So we're seeing a table of all of our clutter values and how much clutter loss is being applied to the subscriber location to account for, potential nearby obstructions, the fact that they might be indoors, whatever. Um, and for this measurement file, we've adjusted the clutter losses, which you notice this auto tune function here. If you're using that methodology of a terrain model plus clutter, this auto tune will automatically seek the best clutter loss values to fit your field measurement data. And so we should be able to adjust the model wherever it started out, which hopefully is fairly close to real world results. We can still make an adjustment where you'll notice the mean error here is down to something approaching zero. We've got zero point 0.0, which is great because that means we're neither over predicting or under predicting coverage. And then we've got this standard deviation of that error. And we have a maximum error value, which is interesting. It means the biggest delta we saw was 34 dB between predicted and measured. But this standard deviation allows us to quantify how much more variable is the real world than what I'm predicting for on my map, which is obviously something of a simplification of the real world. So this standard deviation value can be used either to apply additional fading loss to to your target threshold, your design criteria, or to sort of understand and make confidence statements to your customer or to the product manager to say, okay, this prediction is accurate plus or minus, or if we want a 95% confidence prediction, for example, I might double this standard deviation value and apply that as margin and say this is a 95% confidence prediction where 95% of the time you should measure a higher value at the location than what we've actually predicted here. Um, so coming back to this slide again, we can do the test against measurements to test against sort of traditional drive test data. We can do that measurement analysis to test against an entire area study to make comparisons. Or of course, if we've got a fixed point to multi-point network with different heights, we can run that multi-point study and compare the results directly, which I can show you how to do that in an upcoming slide here. And finally, the last point I want to make again is that standard deviation between prediction and measurement, you can think of that as really the ultimate measure of how accurate this modeling approach is, because you should always be able to adjust the model to get the mean error to something approaching 0 dB. But then that standard deviation tells you really how well this model is accounting for variability in your project area. And so a lower standard deviation is better, even if you need to make a bit of an adjustment to bring it into line with your field trial data. And of course, garbage in, garbage out as far as the measurements. You need to make sure the measurements were taken on kind of a calibrated receiver and you have an accurate GPS pin for them and all of that kind of thing. Um, but having done this, then that's a piece of data that you can give to your customer and say, this is the validation that was done. Here's our confidence in the prediction. You don't have to just try and hang your hat on, well, EDX says that this is the coverage, right? So, moving on to our study query tools. There's a whole host of tools in the software that sometimes folks aren't aware of. And so, just for example, jumping back to my software here, I've got my RSRP LTE coverage study here. And maybe I want to ask myself the question, what percentage of a particular area of interest is covered at an acceptable level. And so up here in the query menu under study queries, here's where we can find all of that out. So you can see in this particular project, I have some area studies set up and I've got the list of them here. And then I've also got some point to multi-point fixed studies set up and I can see the list of those here. Of course, if I had a route study, then that item would be here too, and I can do any of these same category or any of these same queries against, uh, a transportation corridor or fixed subscribers or an area study like this. If we're looking at an area, then maybe we want to describe the polygon that says, okay, here's the area I'm responsible for, and I can put that in here if I go looking for that area polygon file. That can be a BNA file, which is a really simple text format that we use a lot in SignalPro, or that can be a Google Earth KML, map info, MIF mid, or Esri shape. So as long as you've got a polygon we can point to, then we can query against it. One benefit to the Signal Pro format is that if you use our service area boundary format and service area boundary tool, which is up here in the draw menu, by the way, I can draw a service area boundary that has both an overall boundary to include, but then I can also make exclusions for things like lakes or areas that I don't really care about. So coming back in here, I've got my service area boundary file defined, and maybe I want to just set one threshold. This is my main, target criteria. I need to have negative 110 dBm of RSRP across the whole study area. So I'll go ahead and highlight that and run the query. And here I can see I've got, hey, great number to report to my customer, 99.6% of the area. But if I need to come back and look at how that breaks out for, maybe a couple different signal levels, well, how many of these are above negative 90 then? I can add a few levels to this, run the query, and I get a new chart here as well as this simple table that shows me, well, 83% just about fall into the above negative 90 dBm range, and about 17% fall into the range between negative 90 and negative 111. So if that's marginal, maybe I would want to improve those areas. Over here on the left, we've got a table that gives each sector's overall contribution where it's the strongest server for that area. And if we want to, we can export that table out to just a simple CSV file. And by the same token, if we want to see these charts or my distribution here for the area study, I can use this write PDF tool, and I have a nice configurable uh, tool here that'll write these graphics and these results out to a PDF for me. If I run this on a multi-point study, so let's say I run the query for my fixed point to multi-point subscribers, then I've got 2,501 of them here, and each one of these is then a fixed subscriber, and it's showing me my calculated study result, just depends what study I've queried here, as well as the azimuth, elevation, and distance back to the serving sector that's providing that coverage. And if I want to do this for throughput, then of course I can do this for throughput. And the only difference I'll see is that I'm getting my answer in megabits per second. And of course I can export all of this to CSV as well. So if I want the answer for every fixed subscriber location, and they've all got different heights and they've all got different equipment types, well, that's fine. I can set up a multi-point study, run the design criteria that I want to see, and then export this directly to a CSV. And honestly, if you want to compare fixed results against each other, often that's easier to do in just a spreadsheet here, so that I could compare my field measurements against what I'm predicting in the tool. And this could be for coverage or bit error rate or data rate or whatever the design criteria was. So this study queries tool is a really useful way to say, okay, I've got 95% of the total area or the total route or what have you covered. And another neat thing about this is you can, yeah, if you look at this table here, you can query the clutter data for your project area, and that'll help you understand which clutter types are the most relevant for your area, and maybe which clutter types you want to focus on if you're doing any model tuning. Again, just to remind you where to get to that, that's under the query menu and study queries. And we'll talk about this area study queries by point in just a moment. That's another really useful tool here. Um, so that area study queries by point, this feature actually started out as a customer feature request where the story is, let's say I've got hundreds of thousands of lat long locations within my project area, and I need to be able to sort of quickly look up what is the predicted signal level for that lat long. Of course, I can create a point to multi-point project, or I could create even a mega mesh project if I had millions of endpoints. And mega mesh will support direct fixed point to multi-point that just happens to be massive, in addition to meshing type networks. But if I don't want to actually input all of those hundreds of thousands or millions of points in order to do a precise calculation to each one of them, then I can run my area study like I've got here. That just if I were to zoom way in on this, of course, I've set a grid point spacing and it's created little bins, and so each one of those lat long coordinate pairs, each one of those locations, is going to fall inside of one of those bins. And the area study queries by point tool was designed to let you, initially anyway, was designed to let you plug in a huge list of lat longs and just quickly query this area study and or which area ever area study you select, and get a report, a text report that has that value. I'm going to go ahead and jump into the dialogue here and show you how this works. If I have already put the fixed locations in as CPEs, of course I could just choose a CPE group. Or if I've input them all as candidate tower and pole sites, I can query that. Or I can just point to a CSV file here, and say here's all my lat longs. Or if I'm using Mega Mesh, I can use a meters file. Um, Even if you're not especially interested in the uh, querying fixed points against your area study, though, there's an additional nice feature built into this that I don't know. I guess we could call it a secret feature, where you notice this will export to KMZ. If I browse and give it a file location, I can export this either to individual KMZ files for each study or to a single KMZ file. And the hidden feature about this is that it will export per sector studies. So some of you folks, I'm sure, are already familiar with per sector studies. If I needed to be able to this is a combined coverage that we're looking at here. I'm seeing the RSRP for all of the sectors together. But if I needed to go back and say, well, but what's the coverage footprint of just this 2238 site here? Then I can right click on it, go into focus, and show by setting that as the focus. Since I have run that study in the per sector study mode, and I'll show you how to get to that. If I go to area studies here, you can see for RSRP, this checkbox is checked. And that means that this area study will maintain the individual footprint of each of these sectors. And I can export that in addition to my combined coverage. So if I uncheck focus, I go back to my combined coverage here. Maybe I'll focus a different site here and I can see just the footprint of that one. So that's really handy. And very often I've had SignalPro users say, well, my customer wants to see the combined coverage, but they also want to see the coverage footprint of every single site. And sort of back in the old days, what I would need to do is clone this project and put different transmitter groups in it, essentially running an individual study for each site. Or folks would do crazy things like turn all the sites on and turn them all off and then turn on just one at a time and run the study and export the results. But you really don't have to do that. If you just run that in per sector mode and then go up to your area study queries by point, I'll just, cooking show style, I'll jump to one that I've cooked earlier here. Um, Here I've got in Google Earth, I've opened up those KMZ file exports. So first and foremost, this is my combined coverage. I've got little push pins for each of the sites, and I've got just the combined area coverage. But if I ran that study in per sector mode and I export it using that area study queries by point, then I can get another example here where I've got the individual coverage footprint as a separate layer inside of the KMZ. So in this way, I can run that study one time, export this file, and just go ahead and send it on. This becomes my deliverable because I've got my individual coverage footprints, and they can see how those overlap with each other or whatever they want to do in here. Um, and I've got a combined footprint. And this will work for any of your study types. You can export an area study this way for any of the various different area study types. And same goes, you can export a multi-point study or whatever you need to. Um, the per sector study mode can be done for multi-point studies and route studies as well. Um, okay, so again, the three sort of use cases for that area study queries by point is if you have a bunch of locations and you just want a quick lookup and export of the results for those locations, or if you just want a KMZ export for all of the studies, all of the area studies you have run, you notice I can select either an individual study here, or I can just say export all the calculated area studies. Whether they were run in per sector mode or not, if I check this all calculated results and save them to a single KMZ, I'll get one nice KMZ file that then has all of my different area study types that I've run. So that can be useful as well. And then finally, if you use that per sector mode, you can preserve each sector's individual coverage footprint. If it seems like I'm harping on this, it's because I've had a number of users go, "Wow, this would have saved me so much time if I'd known it before." So I really want to get that one out there in front of you. Um, and then just a couple more slides here, and we'll probably get you out of here a little bit ahead of time. I wanted to just go through the different export sort of options and types you have for each of the different kinds of studies. Signal Pro is really useful in that We're technology agnostic. You can study just about any wireless technology. Um, we can be used for indoors and outdoors, as well as all these different topologies, either fixed network or area wide. Mega mesh studies or extremely large scale mesh studies, point to point microwave links. We serve all of these different radio planning needs, and sometimes folks aren't aware of all of the options to export each of the given study types. So I wanted to go through them here and how we get to them. The most central way to get to any of these study result exports is just to remember when you run a study, it's going to give you a map layer. And so if I go into my map layers dialog, I can highlight any of those studies, like my RSRP at pole height, and I can just click on export layer, and it'll show me all of my different options for that. If I do just want to make, again, one Google Earth KML that maybe has multiple different layers, multiple different study types in here, I can also hit this Export KMLs button, and I can just select which of the layers I want to include in a KML. And you can see I've got a mix of area studies, multi-point studies, tower locations. All of this stuff can be exported out into what's going to be one big multi-layer KMZ file here. Um, so that's some study layers as well as some of the data that I've imported, like that towers and poles. So that can be really helpful to export all of those layers to your customer all at once, or a non-Signal Pro user all at once. And for area or grid-based studies, we've got KMZ, which is Google Earth, Esri Shape, Map Info tab. You can always do the per sector KMZ, and you can always go and query against those area studies with the study queries tool. For the multi-point and route studies, it's really similar. We've got KMZ, we've got map info, but you can also just export to regular old CSV. If we're just doing a list of fixed points, you can always just export that to a table. Um, and I should point out for multi-point studies, if we've got a whole bunch of links in the project, and I've got a fair few in this one. If I show my CPE to hub links and maybe hide this other uh, here, let's say I've got a fixed network and I want to be able to show that path profile. Whoops, there we go. If I want to be able to show the path profile for every one of these fixed subscriber locations and be able to create a document that has all of those, well, that's fine if I only have a few CPEs. I can come in here and just go to the CPE by hand and hit write PDF to get a link report for that CPE. But of course, if I have hundreds or thousands of those, I don't want to do that. So in the multi-point studies dialog here, be aware you can also run link studies from servers to CPEs. And what this is going to do is uh, plug in all of your CPEs and your base stations and run them as though you've done a uh, a point-to-point microwave analysis. So you'll get that same path profile, you'll get availability statistics, all that kind of stuff. And you can export that out to PDF, which I've got one here just to show you what that looks like as well. I perhaps chose not a very great color scheme for my text, but this is telling me, here's my sector ID and my CPE or fixed subscriber ID, and there's what the path looks like, and here are the stats for that path, my received signal level, and so on. And in this example, I've got some fairly short paths, but here's some with some clutter along it. And wanted to show you that query report that you can get from the study queries tool as well. If you remember that histogram graph and the breakdown of areas, this is what if we were to just write a PDF from those graphics, that's what that would look like there. Um, so for any link or multi-link studies, obviously we can export those path profiles into a PDF that looks like that. Or of course we can export them out to the map and show those link paths on KMZ or on Map Info or any other GIS tool. Finally, mesh studies. If you've got hundreds of thousands or millions of meter locations or smart streetlight locations or something like that, we can, of course, export that to GIS. We can export it to a big table that simply shows the number of hops and connectivity and performance for each meter. Or crucially, we've got topology and latency reports where we can identify potential vulnerabilities in the mesh and say, hey, all of these meters are vulnerable to disconnection, and here's the cut nodes where they might get cut off. And then the latency report will tell you what's the end-to-end connection time likely to be like, given the number of hops and their distance. And for today's example, I won't go ahead and dive all the way into a mesh study to show you those reports. Uh, but I will say anybody on the call today, if you're running mesh studies and you'd like to dive more into the reporting and what all you can get out of the tool, I would love to take you through that. So just reach out either through the support portal or reach out to us through your sales account manager, whoever, and we can set up a customer success session. And really, that goes for any of our users. If if your workflow through Signal Pro is not working out real great for you, if it feels too cumbersome, or you're not sure how to get the deliverables and the reports out that you want, please do reach out to us and let us know what you need. Let us know what you're trying to get, and we'll help you out. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and shut up, hopefully, and open it up to Q&A. I'll be taking a look at the Q&A panel here. Hopefully, we've gotten past the audio issues. Hmm. There's one question here. Can we do many technology layers in one prediction? Um, Generally, the benchmark, the performance criteria is going to be different for your different technology layers. And so we would set up, independent studies for each of those and show the prediction. Certainly, you can show, if there's a metric that's going to be the same, like just pure coverage or pure path loss, then you can involve more than one frequency band and more than one technology in a single study. But you have to be a little careful to make sure that the performance criteria you're studying against is truly the same for each of those different technology layers. And then it's just a matter of setup. I would say if you've got a particular use case you're thinking of, feel free to send us a note and let us know what the combination is and what you'd like to see in terms of the prediction. Another question regarding KMZ exports. Any thoughts or plans regarding the scheduled end of support for the Google Earth Windows application in mid 2027? That's a great point, and we can export currently to a variety of other GIS formats. I don't imagine we'll pull support for Google right away. But in addition to, the 3D integration with Esri, which is as Esri is sort of the next biggest GIS platform, I would say, and we've already got a 3D display integration with them. And because of the ability to export to uh, Esri or Map Info formats, we're really pretty cross-platform compatible with other GIS tools, whether you're using QGIS or whatever the case may be. Um, I would say that probably if folks start jumping to another GIS platform that we don't already support in a smooth, seamless way, we'll probably be looking to make very similar features for that platform. Another question, is it possible to export site data as a shape file? And gosh, I have to think about that. Normally, the site information itself, if I wanted to just export my site data, I would come into my spreadsheet editor and use typically the sectors data spreadsheet because that's got every radio and all the heights and etc. And I would go into hide show columns and maybe hide all the stuff I don't care about, which is a lot of stuff, right? To make a simplified version of the table, and I would export that to CSV or to MIF. Um, the Esri shape format is typically used for polygons or describing sort of vectors. And so, as such, I don't think we have a direct export to shape. But if you are using shape, this export to MIF would that would be importable in Esri as well. Esri can import map info, MIF, mid. So if I'm just trying to get the push pins for my sites, I think that's probably how I would do it there. Okay, keeping up with the questions dialogue here. It says we run primarily area studies. When replying to RFPs, we see requirements to provide maps in PDF format. Are there any developments that make the process of making PDF maps easier? It's very time consuming for us today. Boy, that is a legitimate beef. I agree. The creation of the PDF maps. So let's say I want to do that just to take a quick look at what they're talking about here. I'll turn back on my RSRP at pole height and turn off some of this other stuff. If I want to make a PDF print of this, um, I can use typically either the image save or the print. I tend to use the print mode because it's document based, and I can say, here's the size of a document I want to make, and here's the DPI that I want, and all that stuff. So I would go into, my print details here and choose a PDF driver. And then if I want to see what is going to be included in the map window, there's kind of a disconnect potentially between my screen resolution and the resolution and DPI of that document. So this print preview mode I can use and based on the document size and dimensions I have set up, I can sort of zoom in and out and get this situated the way I want, and then save that out to a PDF. Currently, at the moment, we don't have any automation for this or any way to say, spit this out for every one of my area studies. We are open to feature requests of that nature, but I've also got another sort of thing to tease here in a moment that might sort of obviate the need for that. Let me get through the rest of these questions, and then I'll say one more thing about that PDF printing issue because I agree it's not totally ideal at the moment. Um, it says if you're using the DAS module, can you still run a query study for the same percentages by DB level thresholds? Yeah, great question. Absolutely. What you would want to do is by the same token, you'll establish your study grid around the building with whatever grid resolution, and then you'll want to set a polygon for your area of interest and sort of carve out the areas that are actually in the building and maybe are actually occupied areas. And then that same, if I'm running an indoor project, that same study query tool would let me do the breakdown of here's my indoor areas and how much of them are above a given threshold. Next question. Can we import a list of sites, um, some of the network, and perform a prediction for this list within the existing surrounding sites? Yeah, absolutely. The way that we would do that, in short, is with uh, transmitter groups. So I'll go back into my spreadsheet tool again here because this is my preferred way to do this. Let's say I've got the entire network in an overall project, and I want to do just just a particular subset of those. I can create a group here. I'm going to call it study group and then hit create. And now this creates a subgroup of radios or base station radios in the project. If I highlight my master group, it's always going to show everything in the project. If I highlight the study group, well, there's nothing in here, so nobody gets shown yet. So what I'll do is, let's say, just by crazy coincidence, I only want to look at these first three sites and run their prediction. Then I would go ahead and highlight those rows in the spreadsheet editor. And down here in the groups section, I would say, okay, I want to put those in the study group. So I'll click add rows to group. And then if I go back and look at that study group, it's only got the three sites in it. And so I'll click OK. And then, whoop, it disappeared behind my Zoom window. When I go to set up an area study, so let's say I'm setting up my coverage study, by default, it's using the master group, but I can select any of those subgroups. And just one side detail to this, if I want to treat neighboring sites as possible interferers to this main group, that's what this secondary transmit group is for. If I go and say I want to do the C over I ratio for primary group to secondary group TXs, I could create another transmitter group of the interference generators and treat those as like an uncoordinated network in the same band. And it's going to give me my C to I ratio considering those interferers. So definitely, yes, you can use transmitter groups to set up which sites or which sectors within the project will be used for that particular study. Um, Okay, next question. If we're not set up for multi-point study, is there any way to output the profile to point data for an area study? Um, I do have the ability, let's say I go and make this my focus sector here. So I've right-clicked, it turns red once it's the focus. And if I want to highlight a particular area, maybe I want to say, why is this little hole in coverage here? It's strong on both sides. So what's going on here? I can do a profile to point by setting my reference box cursor there and then right clicking and going study, profile to point. I select a mobile remote unit and so I selected my 1 meter high mobile and whoa, hey, there's why we've got no coverage there. There's a big old hill on one side. So we've got a really bad diffraction loss. I could write this to PDF and you'll notice that I've got my location that I highlighted here. I've got my distance, all those kind of statistics. So if I have some spots I want to single out and say, here's what the path profile looks like to this location, then I certainly could create these profile to points and export those. We don't have something that would automatically export the profile for every grid cell in an area study. And the reason for that is because most of the time there would just be way too many grid cells, and you really don't want a path profile to, 15,000 grid cells. Um, so if you've got another use case in mind though where you really need that, please do reach out to us. We're open to trying to help you figure that out. Um, Okay, final question. Oh no, there's still more questions coming in. I'm glad I left time for this. Okay, next question. Um, uh, for surrounding Q, I guess questions. So we need to list the surrounding sites or have a polygon, or can it be calculated automatically for the nearest sites to the site list? I think that I assume this is in response to talking about transmitter groups. If I want to just on the screen make a list of groups, the way I would do that is with my polygon tool. So I would go up here to the draw menu and select polygon. And here I can click some points to say I want to select the sites in this polygon, and I double clicked to close that polygon, and then I can right click on it and say create TX group from polygon. And it's gone ahead and grabbed all the sectors inside that polygon and made a group for me. Um, the piece that we don't have that I think I'm seeing this in the question, if I wanted to say, okay, this is my list of desired sites, now automatically pull in every site within some distance from those sites. We don't have an automatic feature for that. I think. Gee whiz. I'm not sure how I would approach that. I think what I might try to do is take this polygon and spread it by some distance and grab all the sites into there. Um, that's an interesting use case, though. If you would like to fill us in a little bit more on what you're trying to accomplish exactly, we might be able to find a workaround to get you there, or maybe we can put that in as a feature request. Um, so if this draw a polygon and then create TX group from polygon, if that doesn't quite get you 100% of the way there, just let us know what you're trying to accomplish and maybe we can figure that out. Okay, I think I've gotten to the bottom of the questions list, and unless anybody else is feverishly typing in another question. Okay, doesn't look like it. Well, so hey, I really thanks a lot everyone for joining today. I really appreciate the level of participation. The questions and answers, or rather the questions you guys submitted are great things that I hadn't quite thought of. Um, so thanks again for joining today. Oh yeah, I was about to do my coming soon before we all jump off here. Um, some of these reports, we just really wish we could say to the software, hey, create a PDF of the coverage, all the coverage plots in this project, or which one of these two sites covers this area better, or something like that. And EDX has been working on this in the background, and there's a beta already of the MPC or MCP, sorry, connectivity, where in a future release as a feature you'll be able to connect EDX Signal Pro and or Satellite Pro, which is our non-terrestrial networks tool, to whatever MCP compatible AI tool that your organization uses. So your Gemini, your Chat GPT, Claude, etc. And if you have a constellation of MCP compatible tools, including AI, you can set those up for your own custom workflows. You can have a large language model that you can ask to do a task in Signal Pro and have it go off and do that task and deliver you the report. So as a report maker, boy, that's just going to be the best. And that's coming soon. And if you haven't already seen the name drop for Satellite Pro, you might want to go check out Satellite Pro on the edx.com website as well. Uh, so again, thanks so much for joining. Thanks so much for staying engaged and giving me all those questions, folks. I hope you have a great day, and please do reach out to us if there's any way we can help you with your projects.